So when Netflix first started, most people don't remember, but they were actually a mail order DVD company. But they went after one value proposition. People hated late fees. So Netflix, they said, we'll mail you the DVD, mail it back to us when you want. We aren't going to charge you. But for Blockbuster, that was a huge profit and loss statement line item. Yeah, sure. So I'll take a step back. So I got some gray hair, so I've been in the industry for a while. So in January, when it's super cold, I didn't want to drive to the video store to drop off the DVD. Now I don't have that. So that's what I see is they come in from the outside, but they looked at the industry as a whole and they figure out how to create new value, and it's with that digital first mindset. The stat that McKinsey is publishing right now is 67% of all digital transformations fail. And AI it's a transformation, but it's all around data, and it's got a lot more nuances and complexities in it. It's really around starting small, trying things, and iterating through it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Digital Executives Hub. This time, my guest would be Rod Schatz, and please tell me if I pronounced it correctly.
You got it right.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. So I'm gonna ask Rod to tell us a little bit about himself at the beginning, but also I want to tell you why I think Rod is great addition to Digital Executives Hub podcast and then community. When we first met, I already had this idea that the data is king. I already had the idea that we will be developing different kind of devices, IoT devices, IIoT devices, and we will be collecting more and more data. But eventually, we'll have to figure it out and draw conclusions, figure out the patterns, and there will be so much data that will get lost without people like Rod. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. And yeah, I think this is like proper introduction on my side, and then Rod, if you like, please tell us something about yourself.
Sure, great, thanks, Paul. So, very honored to be part of your podcast. In terms of my background, I have a master's degree in geospatial statistics, so been a data person for quite some time, and been.
Excuse me, that sounded like like a magic word. I'm sorry that I'm interrupting, but maybe for the people that didn't understand, what is that exactly?
Sure. So there's some digital mapping technology called the Geographic Information System. So I did a degree that specialized in that technology, and in particular the applied use of statistics within the mapping realm. So in essence, I was learning data science before data science was a term. And then when I got out of university, there were no jobs in that particular realm of the industry. So I had to reinvent my career.
Yeah, I want to know more about your journey, because it does sound like, everything evolved and now there's maybe more options or whatever you were studying is now recognized even more than when it was when you graduated. But then, we can talk about it later on. But I'm sorry, I just had to ask because I'm pretty sure there will be people wondering, what exactly did you just say? So now we can move on with the introduction. Sorry.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I've been involved in data my whole career. So I've been doing data-related projects. So I primarily specialize in building enterprise strategies for organizations and then delivering the technology. So with a strategist and an implementation specialist. And with that, I've noticed a bunch of themes throughout my career. And in 2016, I helped co-author a book on digital transformation and business model evolution. And that's part of what I want to talk about today. And then I've held numerous executive jobs for organizations where I focused on digital and data transformation. And I've got lots of bumps and war wounds related to the journeys that I've been on. But at the end of the day, technologists love solving business problems and really banging home runs for organizations.
Beautiful. Can we start with the book? Because
sure.
You mentioned that it will be something that you want to discuss. what was the outcome of that book? Like what, like I'm guessing that writing a book is kind of doing a lot of research, right? And then, thinking that through and then putting that on paper, or if it's digital, it's digital. And then what have you learned, through the discovery process of creating that book?
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll take a step back and just give you a bit of background on how we led to this book. So I served on a bunch of boards with two other guys who have become close friends. One is a MBA professor for a university in the province I live in. And then the other is a chief information officer for, at the time, he was with the University of Alberta, the largest university in Alberta where I live. And we used to get together every Sunday to talk tech, talk things local to the city that we live in. And on one Sunday, I threw on the table that there was something happening in the business world related to digitization. But at the time, there were too many data points. And in particular, Blockbuster had just gone bankrupt. So Netflix was around. And so the three of us, being very curious people, we started to dig into this. And then we realized that there was definitely a book in this. And so we started to do, as you mentioned, a ton of research. And through that research process, we really ultimately found that there's what we call the two-order disruption model. So the incumbents, they're comfortable in their industry, they have their existing client base, and then an entrant, in this case, as I was talking, Netflix, pops up. They use digital technologies in a different way. They've created a new value proposition, and they disrupt the incumbent. And then, so that's the first order. So when Netflix first started, most people don't remember, but they were actually a mail order DVD company. But they went after one value proposition. People hated late fees. So Netflix, they said, we'll mail you the DVD, mail it back to us when you want. We aren't going to charge you. But for Blockbuster, that was a huge profit and loss statement line item on their general ledger. So they weren't willing to get rid of that value. But Netflix, being a digital disruptor, they had a roadmap, which was mail order DVD, but their real business that they were striving for was streaming. So Blockbuster ignored Netflix. By the time they had a couple internal committees, they were on the verge of going bankrupt. The second order that we found is Netflix, when it moved into streaming, disrupted cable companies, telecom companies, and then ultimately disrupted the movie studios that they were actually supporting. And now, as we know, Netflix, I wanted the three of us to get back together and write a second book related to this, but I think there's a third order model because Netflix now creates their own content. So that's what we saw. And we saw this across many different industries. There's Airbnb. We're now seeing OpenAI do something very similar related to coming in out of the blue and disrupting multiple industries. So that's what the book was, and that's what we learned.
Yeah. Quick follow-up question. Do you think that that Netflix, they analyzed how did they come up with this idea? Because they are disrupting more than one industry right now. But do you think that they actually, spoke to people like you and they figure out, they look at the numbers and they figure out that this is what we'll be doing because, we did enough research and we understand the data, or they just did it by an accident? What do you think?
No, I think there was a lot of research done. I remember when we were doing our research, I found the original pitch deck for Netflix, and it very much showed that their ultimate goal was streaming. So they very much saw, and were pioneers, that they were able to connect a bunch of data points, that the internet was going to fundamentally change the distribution of video. So yeah, no, it wasn't accidental. It was very much deliberate. They really saw, like I said, they saw that the internet, because you have to remember when they started, the internet was still quite young, that the internet was fundamentally going to change how people would consume content, in particular video.
So if I wanted to disrupt the industry, should I get in touch with you and you can help me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love doing business model disruption type work. So I've been the pioneer of 3 startups. I'd love to
Okay.
say that I got a great exit story, but one of my startups, my second startup, we were 12 hours from an exit. We just
Yeah.
weren't ready. So unfortunately, that's a beer conversation when you and I finally meet in person, but
Right.
absolutely love working on this type of work. And I really, like I said at the beginning, I love applying technology to business problems to create value. And that's the fundamental thing that we saw in the book is digitization isn't just about tech. It's not that at
Not
all. It's about creating new value, whether it's internal value to the organization, but more importantly, to a customer. And Netflix is the perfect example. The new value they created, people don't have to leave their house to get a video anymore. And then the favorite feature everybody loves is because you watch this movie, we recommend this movie. And that's in terms of where we want to potentially go with the conversation around data. So a lot of the platform related companies like Netflix, they're collecting tons of data about what we're watching, what we're searching, more importantly, when we're browsing through the catalog, what we look at but don't watch. They take all of those data points and then use it to create a better experience for us. So that's the new value that they're creating.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it so much because this is like creating value proposition, disrupting, and actually, drawing conclusions based on data. I think this is like that fascinates me so much. And I had the whole like agenda that things I wanted to find out, but I just changed it because I try to ask questions that are relevant for the audience. And can we briefly, please, talk about the process of disrupting an industry? Can we like? I know this is maybe very broad, to talk about it today, but like I started thinking when you said that you are the person that can actually help figure out the patterns, and maybe help disrupt any industry with a very unique value proposition. I started thinking we could maybe spend 5 minutes, of just discovering how this process looks like. Like let's say what had to happen for Netflix, to actually come up with those ideas, and maybe use that same approach for some of your startups. I'm really curious about how that happens. What is the process behind it?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, I did a lot of research on this, and I've continued to follow it over the last 8 years. So the initial thing that led to companies like Netflix, Airbnb, Uber, those kind of companies was a key dynamics. So if we talk about from a technology perspective, the first thing was there was a plethora of open source technology out there that meant these organizations could build these custom applications at a lower cost point than having to go and license technology from an IBM or a Microsoft. So that was the first thing. The open source community was there, and there were well-supported projects. The next thing was all of these companies went to the venture capital community and sought money. And all of them, the big ones who have disrupted, they were all very well-funded. So what that means is if you take Netflix, Uber, Airbnb, they all do one thing when they're initially disrupted. They turn to the regulatory requirements that they've built over the decades. So the well-funded startups, they can fight those lawsuits as they happen. And then the third thing is they very much figure out how to do things from a digital first perspective. So Netflix was the great example around, they saw streaming coming. Yeah, they did mail order DVD, but that was so that they could get their foot in the door, test out a bunch of ideas, but their ultimate goal behind the scenes, they were working on an e-commerce streaming distribution mechanism. So that's how I watched disruption happen, but I would say now it's evolving though. So we're seeing a huge proliferation of startups all over. So if you take like generative AI, like I can't keep up anymore. There's so many, but they still have the same dynamics. Technology, the entry point in technology is still low. So it can be open source or maybe some cost, but it's still low. A lot of them are still very well funded. And then the key thing that I see with all of these startups is they focus on a value proposition and they go after it. And the incumbents, are largely ignoring what that value is. So late fees is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
So for us as consumers, we hate late fees. And we also hate, so I live in a colder climate. So in January when it's super cold, I didn't want to drive to the video store to drop off the DVD. Now I don't have that. So that's what I see is they come in from the outside, but they looked at the industry as a whole and they figure out how to create new value. And it's with that digital first mindset.
Yeah, can we talk about this digital first mindset?
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
explore it, because I feel this, makes sense and it's kind of obvious, but on the other hand, what is your perspective on digital first?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take a step back. So I got some gray hair. So I've been in the industry for a while. And what I've seen is a lot of organizations, the way they digitize is they bring in an ERP and they live within the constraints of the ERP. They bring in customer relationship management. And then there's this big gap of they need to digitize certain things. So in the olden days, it would have been literally a clipboard, a paper form, and a pen or pencil. And then they need to digitize. So then what they do is they turn to a PDF and they take the form and they turn it into a digital version of the form.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they've done is they've just taken a legacy process, but they've made it digital. And I use air quotes on digital. And then the key thing though is they didn't look at the process, how they can make it better. Well, we've always collected these 4 data points. So we need to collect those 4 data points in the PDF. So for me, what digital first is to reimagine the process. So if all of the data collected is done digitally, that means we can automate a lot of the process. So I'll give you an example. At the firm I was at prior to going back on my own, we digitized the onboarding process. And it was very much a legacy process that I spoke about, where lots of old paper processes, and then they digitized with PDFs. It was 177 manual steps from when a job description was created to the point when somebody was hired. And it was a lot of copy and paste of, I have a PDF, I copied in an email, I typed some additional stuff. What we did is we looked at the whole thing and said, how can we get rid of as many of these steps as possible? So data was needed at certain steps, but we were able to reuse it. So your first name is Paul. So we made you enter it once, and then anytime we needed it, we just continued to reuse it. So it's reimagining how the process can work without the constraints of a human having to do things. That's digital first for me.
Best explanation ever.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then I have so many questions, but I will try to ask the ones that I feel I want to find out the most. And there's so much data, and you just mentioned that the transformation processes, digitization processes, they very often just digitalize legacy systems, right? So you had it on paper, now you have it in Excel or whatever other. So it is digitalized, but it's not, right? In some way. And I think that happens because companies do not have data strategies. They do not have a strategy. They do not have a plan. They look at the bottlenecks that they notice, because most of them they don't notice, right? They're not aware of most of the problems, I'm guessing. So whatever they see, they want to digitalize. So in this age of like digital transformation, how important it is, to have this data strategy for your organization?
Yes, that's a good question. So for me, it's mission critical. And so I'll go back to the example of Netflix. So behind the scenes, in the example I used, they have a data strategy. So they are collecting reams of data about how we interact with their technology, what we watch. And at the end of the day, I can guarantee Netflix is selling that back to the movie studios to say, we are seeing an increase this quarter in action movies. And so why is that important? Movies are expensive to make. So if you can help the movie studios understand some patterns and trends, they can invest in the right areas. So without a data strategy, it's a bit like walking through a dark forest. How do I get out? So data strategy is mission critical. But not only that, to do proper artificial intelligence, you need data. And I went through this at my past place. Was there were a lot of data gaps in processes. And if you look at what a lot of those startups that I profiled are, they ultimately built what's called a platform business model. So they want to own basically the whole value chain. And what I mean by the value chain is where value is created, but they also want to own you as a customer. And I worked for an organization earlier in my career, and they used to call, in the marketing group, stickiness. You want a customer to be stuck, so it's hard to get your fingers off of the technology. So it's sticky. And without a data strategy, you can't be sticky because you're going to have missing data points. And that's a mission critical thing, is you have to collect data as early as possible so that you can use it in the future. It's kind of like planting a tree, right? So I saw a great infographic last week about it, talked about if you want shade, well, the best time to plant a tree is now so that you'll have shade in the future, because as the tree grows, it blossoms and provides the shade. So it's the same thing with a data strategy. You need to plant the tree as early as possible so that you can evolve your business model to support being a data-driven company.
Oh, it's so good. Because I do experience when digitalization goes wrong, and it usually goes wrong. There's many different factors, but very often there's no strategy. So we are digitalizing. This is like you said, we're digitalizing certain aspects that we think should be digitalized, or maybe they are easy to digitalize, or so it's always a process that is somehow broken. And I think it's broken because there is no strategy, and especially that it's all data now, right? There's the only way we can, measure and optimize is data. So and if there's no strategy for that, we just measure whatever, and we have whatever conclusions based on whatever data, which is not great. And with that being said, there are different technologies that are helping us with digitalization, right? Is there one technology that you see might drive or might be responsible for the most growth in the future?
Wow, one.
Could be two, but I really want to know, what do you think would be the one with your background and knowledge?
Yeah, sure. Maybe it's hard for me to pick a single technology, but I would say, I'll use the place I was at last. So I did develop a data strategy, and it was really a technology and data strategy, but it was focused on two things. So the first was, as I mentioned, the organization had a ton of data gaps, both from an internal process perspective and also from a client perspective. So I looked at the problem, and the technology I brought in is, it was basically a low-code application platform that provided robotic process automation, business process management, and it was web and mobile-based. But what that allowed us to do was to build applications, both mobile and web, at speed and scale. So we weren't custom developing, but we were building applications to fill in all the process gaps. And so why is that important? Because at every stage and step, we were collecting data. And the ultimate goal was to move the organization, like I said, to a platform. So the organization I worked for was a civil engineering firm. So as engineers, they did a lot of projects related to building roads, designing structures, designing bridges. But there was a ton of missing gaps. So the whole purpose was to build as many applications as we could to collect data points. And then the next set of technology that we were using is we were moving into a full data platform. So everything from core data management, so we built a couple of data marts, and then the ultimate goal was to then apply machine learning on top of the data that was collected to solve new client problems and to solve internal processes. So to me, it's those two combinations of technologies, of the low-code build applications at speed and scale to collect data throughout processes, and then it was then giving us the ability to manage the data to move to a platform model.
Yeah, the low code applications, they were important to you because the development of those applications is agile. Like you don't have to, spend millions and years in building them, right?
Yeah,
That would
that's
be
correct.
the key. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that I am, I don't know, the CEO of pretty big company, and I feel like I'm not really following all the trends. I feel that my people are not following all the trends. So and we are looking not at the long perspective. We're looking at short term perspective. What would be maybe some ideas or if you could give an advice to me as a CEO of company that feels that that I'm getting kind of behind all the technology, and I want to keep up. I'm looking at short term because I don't know if I be here 10 years from now, and I really want to adapt to this digital. I want to adapt digital technologies to stay relevant. Because if I'm not adapting, other companies are adapting. I'm in trouble. So what would be like in the nearest future the technologies that in your opinion should be adapted so the companies that do adapt those technologies stay relevant and have almost unfair advantage versus the companies that don't think of technology in that way?
Yeah, sure. So this is a complex question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. So I would say the first part is one of the things that I've done with my 3 startups is how we started was similar to Netflix. Is we sat down and we looked at an industry and a problem. And then there's a design thinking framework that I've used where you look through the problem and it's basically you're building your pitch deck. What's the problem you're solving it? Why are you solving it? Who cares and who's going to pay for it? The first thing I think is you need to put technology on the side and you need to look holistically at your organization. What do you do? Why do you do it? And why do you have customers that you do? And then from there, you need to then look at where is our industry going? And then what are the new demands that our customer base is asking for? So to me, it starts with understanding your industry, your business, and your customer base. Then you can bring in the technology. But I would argue the 2 technologies I spoke about are the ones that I would advocate are going to be the ones where you need to make your investment. So having an enterprise resource planning system, your ERP, that's table stakes. But what your core business is, that's where you need to digitize. And then it's all about collecting that data so that you can outcompete your competitors based on knowledge and automation. And so what I mean by that, I'll go to the example I mentioned before again of a bridge. There's a company out of the Netherlands that has blown my mind. So they're a startup, but what they did is they took biomimicry, which is the study of how Mother Nature has designed things in real world. So think of a leaf from a tree. The veins of the leaf, it goes up and then it goes out to the side. And the leaf is very strong this direction, but very weak this direction. So they took all of these biomimicry principles, put them into an AI engine that they built. And then they said, design us a small span bridge over the canal in Amsterdam. So it designed nothing like what we would ever envision. So it doesn't have I-beams. It doesn't have 90-degree angles. It's this very fluid, curved bridge, and it looks actually like a leaf on the side. And then what they ultimately did, though, is they went and bought some automobile manufacturing robots, the articulating arms, and they programmed it with a tungsten welder to 3D print that bridge. So why is everything that I just talked about important? They've reimagined how a bridge is designed, but it was done from data at the start. And then what they've ultimately done, they've actually built this bridge and they've put sensors. So you talked earlier about IoT. They put sensors on the bridge to collect data points. Why is that important? Now they got a feedback loop in their design process. They understand at certain times when the bridge gets heavy, how the bridge is going to flex. Does that concern them? Well, they can feed that back in. And over time, they just keep doing this cycle. And guess what has now happened? They built a platform business. They're collecting data that their competitors don't have. And they're very hard to compete against. That, to me, is what CEOs need to be thinking about. So again, it starts with understanding your business, your industry, and your customer, and then understanding how to apply technology in that digital-first mindset to build the next evolution of a business.
Wow. I can't wrap my mind around what you just said, because it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable because they started with data, and now probably the platform is selling data, right? So they started with data, and then this is like continuous improvement, right? Of that project that they are working on. And I think that's also something that I wanted to talk to you about, because is there any other way than this continuous improvement approach to business and life these days? Like I think their example is like the best example of, you know, how to build a case around data and then build a business around the data that they are collected. And now they are collecting this data and then selling it back. So this is unbelievable. This is like, I'm sorry, I'm really blown away with what you just said, because I knew data is king, but now I'm looking at it through your through your perspective, which is unbelievable. So this continuous improvement, they are basically doing this, right?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to find out, because I feel that you do have incredible knowledge in terms of what will shape the future, maybe because you're looking at the data and maybe you're already drawing conclusions based on the data that you have access to. But this continuous improvement part, there is this PDCA, plan, do, check, act approach, right?
Yep.
How is DCA related to continuous improvement? And then in that, I know my questions are kind of long and they have several layers, but I hope you can you can manage those. So I'm looking at PDCA, I'm looking at continuous improvement, but I'm also looking at technology. Can we combine those? And I'm sorry again, but that's really fascinates me. Can we combine those and kind of talk about the benefits of that particular approach, which is iterating and collecting more data and then making decisions based on the most current data?
Yeah. So I'm actually glad you asked this question. So one of the things I've noticed, so as you're beginning to discover through this call, I see the world sort of through a different lens. And a large part of that is based on what I learned in the research from the book. And the key thing that I've observed in my career, and it's caused me some bumps and bruises, is my knowledge is at a certain level, but not everybody is along the same path as me. So what I've learned is using your framework, or the plan, do, check, and act model, it's all about creating value early, showing it to people so that they can come along the journey with you. And what I mean by that is, earlier in my career, I had a grand vision for an infrastructure asset management software solution, and we went off and we built it. But we were building it this is before agile and iterative development was around. We were following a waterfall methodology. We were gone for a long time. Then we popped up and said, hey, we're done release 1. And then everybody was like, well, how did you get there? So I then learned and took a bunch of training on iterative software development. And what I ultimately saw is, when you release fast, release often, people can see. So that's the planning part. So you plan, you do, and they're in small iterations. So if we bring that back to data, most people I mean, all of us who have gray hair, we're at a fundamental disadvantage. We never learned technology and we didn't learn data management in school. So for 95% of the population, they don't understand what most technology people are talking about. But if you can do the plan, get them to understand at a conceptual level what you're doing, then they can start to see it, touch it, and interact with it, and then they can start to actually act on it. So I'm a huge believer in iterative value proposition design and release, and that allows people to go on the journey. And not only that, the key thing is a lot of this stuff is really complicated. So you don't fully understand if we create this certain product and it has these attributes, how is the customer going to use it? And a great example is early in my career, so I studied architecture. So not technology, but architecture. And I remember in one of my classes at the university I was at, there was a huge courtyard and it was all grass. And when they built the courtyard, they didn't build any sidewalks. Sorry, they built a sidewalk, but they didn't build any other sidewalks. And what they did is, the reason they did that is they wanted to see the paths that people would just naturally go to. And so they let that happen for a year, and then they saw the trails that people built, and then they built sidewalks where those trails were. And it's very similar in the technology and data world of, it's hard to anticipate exactly how people are going to use everything, but if you build the one sidewalk, then they can start to use it, and then you can start to see where they navigate, and then you build on top of that, and it's basically like an onion. There's lots of layers on it.
That's a great analogy for building your business, right? Not just sidewalks, but see what works, or do those small iterations, and then show it to people as soon as possible. Get their feedback, implement the feedback, and come back the next day with better solution. So you exactly. are 1% better every single day, which is the idea of Agile, I think.
It is absolutely.
Yeah, and then now I wonder, about whenever you're talking to digital executives or just executives that are interested in applying change, discovering a better future, through technology, and they ask you about the ROI of that investment, right? Because I'm guessing super difficult to explain, but how often does that happen that they ask you for ROI, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, so how often? Always. So I think almost every day I'm in an ROI conversation with some executive. So in terms of how I've approached it, I would say it's sort of in two aspects. So with technology, there's a foundational layer that has a very difficult ROI. And what I mean by that is, it's like having a house. So in North America, we build foundations, concrete foundations for our house, and that supports the house above us. Without the foundation, the house is eventually going to crack, creak, and break. So the foundation is mission critical. The return on investment on the foundation is somewhat abstract to measure, but it needs to be there. And then in terms of the actual house, it's the ROI on that is much easier because you can start to measure process efficiencies, new revenue for customers, or new value propositions for customers, and potential market penetration that we weren't in. So definitely important. At times can be abstract and hard to measure, but it's something that I do on a regular basis. I was actually doing it this morning before our call around building in a return on investment for a large initiative that I'm working on for a client. So very important, but I always now frame it in terms of the value proposition. So the organization is here, you're able to do A, B, and C. With this new technology, here's the tangible and intangible benefits that you're going to realize from this. Part of the challenge, though, I will admit, is for many executives who are digital natives, they don't believe it. So I look at my last place I was at, I built a return on investment for bringing in that load code technology. And I think with some simple calculations, I got it up to about $60 million in return, like positive return. They didn't believe me. But everything around the organization was either a clipboard or a PDF. It was so inefficient. So by digitizing that, and saving, like, I think the calculation I used is we'll save every employee 15 minutes per day, which isn't a lot. And over 1,000 employees, it compounds itself.
It is a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're looking at the scale of that company, it is a lot. It's unbelievable. And like, what would be the motivation of that, executive or the decision-making committee? Like, why wouldn't they believe you?
Yeah, so I can't speak to how it is in Europe, but I do think Europe-related technology is much more progressive. I'll speak to, so I'm in Canada.
But see, that's interesting because we in Europe think that you are more progressive on the technology part. So that's interesting.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. So Canadian businesses, and I read a great article yesterday about this, are very risk adverse. So the challenge that I've seen in my career, and I've sat at a lot of executive tables, is business executives have a fundamental distrust of technology people. And the core reason is they don't understand our language, our lexicon, lots of 3-letter acronyms, but they've all been burned in the past by do this, bring in this technology, it'll change our lives, and then they never saw their lives change. So I think that's some of the fundamental problems around some of the challenges, is overcoming some of those hurdles. That, I will argue, scares me from the future of a firm perspective. Because we're now, in the last 9 months, we've seen generative AI go from this kind of nothing thing to having the potential to fundamentally change and disrupt industries. So this is one of the things I'm trying to solve behind the scenes, is help executives cross what I call the digital divide, where they are today, where they distrust technology, to where they understand it, believe it, and want to empower their organization through technology.
All the companies, all the people that are really trying to change the world, improve it, digitalize it, they are all dealing with the same problem, that there's just not enough trust. Or what I'm thinking is the buying committee does not understand it enough to actually make a conscious decision about, purchasing that. The other part is that the bigger the organization, the more they care for, I would call them safe decisions, right? So they're not big on taking the risk, I think. So how can we, you, me, and the other people that are really trying to help, that are really trying to, use technology, use whatever is available to help, optimize, save money. What can we do? Like, you just said that this is something that you're trying to do. Like, what techniques, what are you using, so you're able to actually explain them the benefits of implementing technology?
I think the first thing is education. And this is one of the things that I've seen, I'll speak again for the Canadian landscape that I interact with, is a lot of executives and a lot of organizations aren't learning cultures. And they very much need to be a learning culture. So if you want to transform through digital or data, you really need to start to interact and understand some of the lexicon, so some of the terms and the words and some of the theory. And I'm not talking about you need to be able to code, but you need to be able to understand some of this stuff. So I think that's the first thing. The next thing is, I believe organizations need innovation engines. And with the innovation engine, to me, it's very much about what we just spoke about. It's about being iterative. It's about failing fast. It's about having the ability to generate ideas, test them out. And if it works, great. Now we figure out how to scale that to the next level so it can become a profitable product or service. I think those are really the first two things. So it starts with education, so that, back to some of the things we talked about, is an executive has some of the base knowledge that they can start to go, okay, I see this and I can be able to draw the line between these two things. Versus where I see a lot of executives there's just all these floating points and they're like, I'm not understanding this. This is confusing, it's scary, and it makes me feel anxious. So that's the first part, is education. The next part is actually just getting out there and testing things. And it comes back to that design thinking framework that I spoke about. It's about generating an idea. It's going out and doing it. I've seen some organizations do hackathons well to test things. One of the things I was working on at my previous firm is what I called pirates in the Navy. So there's a great quote from Steve Jobs who talked about he'd rather be a pirate, so have a little nimble ship than work for a big organization that was the Navy. And so the framework that I built out for that organization was very much about how can we build lots of little pirates, but do it in a safe, constructive manner to permit the growth of big ideas and the business model evolution. So I think it's sort of those two things.
Yeah. How are those executives reacting to like a proof of concept? If you're saying that, we don't have to, spend millions and invest a lot of time. How about, we start with a little proof of concept? Because what you told us before, about you doing some, basic analysis and coming up with $60 million savings. I mean, that probably didn't take you much time, right, to be able to do that. So that's kind of like proof of concept approach, or not really?
That one, so doing that investigation did take a fair amount of time. So I needed to understand the organization. I needed to understand the processes. But the pirates in the Navy idea is very much about de-risking the decision for an executive. So I'll give you an example is back to that previous firm. So one of the things that I was looking at was 5 years from now, how is engineering design going to be done? It's probably going to be done 100% digital. But the fundamental problem all engineers have is they need to understand the environment that they're designing it. So what I mean by that is you're building a building on the land. What does the land look like? So typically that you have a surveyor, they go out, they collect some stuff, and then they send in a bunch of raw data. So one of the things we were working on was taking what's called LiDAR, which creates a 3D representation of the world. And then we partnered up with the local university near me, which is one of the top artificial intelligence schools in the world. And we were doing what's called feature extraction. So we would take the LiDAR out, it would scan the landscape. So it would see a light pole, it would see a fire hydrant, it would see the road and the curbs. We used AI to automatically find all those features and then pull it into the design tools for the engineers. Why is that important? So it's eliminating a lot of manual steps. It's eliminating a lot of cost. Gets back to the data-driven approach I spoke about. But ultimately, what it allowed us to do, it was a small proof of concept. When I spoke about this with the executive team, they had no idea what I was talking about. But after a small proof of concept, they were able to go, oh, I get it. You've just eliminated a ton of cost, which for our client, we're saving the money, we're more efficient, and now we're able to do new things with that data. So that's an example. It's all about de-risking the investment. But again, back to what I talked about I talked about the plan, do, act methodology. We did the planning, we did the doing, and now they were able to act on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then the question that I have is I wanted to understand the difference between digital strategy or data strategy. Like, are they like similar? One of them is more important than the other one. I know this is like out of the blue question, but I just thought of that because we are talking about data and we are talking about strategies, and is there one that is more important, like the digital strategy is more important than the data strategy, or maybe this is the same thing?
So to me, I've seen and I've worked on some where the digital strategy is a combination of both.
Okay.
I've also created some where they are separate. But the key thing is that they work in conjunction with each other. And to go back to the example I spoke about, the digital strategy is how are you digitizing business processes? And that's typically, like I said, it's a web application, it's a mobile application. But at the end of the day, you're collecting data. That's where that strategy stops. So it's really around the human interaction with technology for the ultimate goal of collecting data. But the data strategy itself is, now that we have all this raw data. So an example I used to use is the digital strategy is like sugarcane. So it's this nice, beautiful plant, but it's raw. It's unrefined. The data strategy is taking the raw and turning it into either candy, or the organization I used to work for, they wanted me to say rum. So refined sugarcane. But the key is you now have an end product out of the data strategy. So that's how I envision those.
Okay, I think, for other people watching and listening, I think this is important because those two things are kind of similar, but they have, very unique purpose, I believe. And I wish there was more like communities, more people like you, sharing this kind of information, because whenever we do share those information, we maybe inspire, some people that are, that are about to make a decision, for their companies. Because if you're not digitalizing or creating data strategies, then you're becoming irrelevant with time. And I think more and more people should talk about it, but should talk about it in a way that you're doing this. Because I feel that, every question that I ask, you explain it so well and so simple. Like, that kind of tells me that you really do understand it very well, because I think this is Albert Einstein that said that, if you can explain it very well, that means you don't understand it very well. But you make it easy to understand, because you're talking about pretty complex solutions and just ideas. But then, I ask you a question, and then you can explain it, like in a way that just sticks. I feel that, okay, I think I got it, like it wasn't that difficult. Yeah, good stuff. So, if we're talking about the future, because, I do like to talk about the future, because this is where we are all heading, basically. And then if you are, to advise, again, let's say that I'm the CEO, and then if you were to advise, people like me, of, the future part, and that, how is that related to the role that data plays in organizations. So I know we kind of, talk about the data a lot, in this episode, but I still feel that there are those nuances that you are able to explain just because of your background and the way you understand data. So we all know that the future is all about data, but how would you help, understand decision makers, people that you talk to on regular basis, and I'm guessing that you are trying to help them understand that that the data plays a crucial role in the future of every single organization. So how are you convincing them that data is the future? I'm guessing that most of them is not willing to accept that, right? They're not ready maybe to accept that. But if you are to influence a lot of people, that might happen, to listen or watch this episode and this particular question, how would you convince them that data will play this crucial role for the future of pretty much an organization?
Yeah, so part of the story related to this is quite easy. If you look at some of the largest public companies in the world, Facebook, Google, they have one advantage, and they're collecting data about us as consumers, but they're able to resell access to that data to everyone else. So Google and Facebook, as an example, they're ultimately advertising companies, but what they're selling back to their customers, you can target specific individuals. And that is a data-driven company. And if you look at their market value, compared to any other organization, they're monstrous. And it's because they are, at the end of the day, data companies first, and then they're solving business problems secondarily. You can apply this to anything. So as an example, I'm working with a clean tech company right now, and their core product is a filter that scrubs carbon out of effluent. But what they're ultimately trying to do is they're designing a data strategy about how do we provide value back to our customer. It's all about the data. So they're collecting data points on their product, but at the end of the day, they're selling this to the oil and gas industry as one segment so that the oil and gas industry can go, hey, look at, here's all the metrics that we have. So they're creating huge value to the oil and gas company, but at the end of the day, it's about data. That's one example. So there's multiple examples on this like that. If you don't have the data, it's really hard to compete. So CEOs all want to leave a legacy. They want the firms that they work for to last the test of time. We now live in the data era. It's those who understand it, understand how to, using my sugarcane example, how to harvest it, but how to refine it. It's the refinement is where the real money is.
Yeah, so the one statement that, every CEO should think about is, if you want to leave a legacy, please collect, analyze, and draw conclusions based on data. I think that is a good argument to make. Now, if you really want to, especially in the times that we live in, if you really want to be famous, for something, if you really want to have an impact, I think data is the way to go. And we're talking about huge amounts of data, huge quantities, right? Like unbelievable, because there is more and more that we measure, collect. Sometimes we don't even know what to do with the data. Do you think that cloud computing is playing a big role, in the ability, if our ability, to analyze the data? What is like your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's back to when I spoke about how open source has opened up doors for new ideas and the proliferation of ideas. I do think the cloud has done similar things because it's lowered the cost of entry. And what I mean by that is, so if I have an idea for a business, I don't have to go off and hire an army of technology people, so people to manage my servers and to install the software. That's all done. I just pay my monthly fee, and then I can actually get to creating the value that I need to create. So definitely that has a role. I will admit, though, the cloud is getting expensive in some areas. So I'm starting to see a bit of a trend and a migration away from cloud in certain instances.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is because of the price of it, or?
Because of the price, yeah. In my blog reading, I'm starting to see more and more stories about we're bringing back the technology from the cloud. But if you let's go to the latest shiny object, which is generative AI. That one is definitely cost prohibitive to try and do by yourself. You have to go to you don't have to, but it's much more practical to go to the cloud and leverage that infrastructure.
I have this question that I kind of asked already, but I want to get back to it and maybe talk about three different ideas that companies maybe should focus on, so they are still competitive in the next 3 to 5 years. Because the technology evolves so fast that I don't want to talk about 10 years from now. I think talking about 3 to 5 years makes the most sense, considering this considering the speed of technology development that we're experiencing right now. So 3 to 5 years, what in your opinion would be technologies, business ideas, just things that in your opinion companies should focus so they are still relevant 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah, so I think I'll put the technology on the side for a second. First is I think it's all around understanding the value proposition today of your firm. Mm-hmm. And number two, it's about the future potential value proposition. And then from there, you can layer on the technologies. So I still think there's going to be that need for digitization. So the low code technology I still think is mission critical. The next one is really around, I'm fascinated with the impact generative AI is going to have on organizations. The thing that I haven't seen yet is how is everybody going to start to derive value? And at the end of so let's take a law firm. So a really good lawyer is somebody who knows case law. So that's all the cases in the past and the outcomes. In that particular case, an AI, generative AI, is really good at understanding all of that case law and then having the ability for people to interact with it. So if you're a lawyer, how do you derive new value in that type of scenario? It's really around the strategy and still being able to connect all those dots. So I think generative AI has the greatest potential to have a big impact on organizations, but it's really around how do you use it to be more strategic to create something your clients really want. That's the fundamental thing, I think. I think there's a lot of danger for firms, though, that just jump into AI without having a plan. And what I mean by that is the stat that McKinsey is publishing right now is 67% of all digital transformations fail. And AI it's a transformation, but it's all around data, and it's got a lot more nuances and complexities in it. It's really around starting small, trying things, and iterating through it.
So yeah, the 67%, it sounds crazy because that's probably hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions. I don't know. If we are looking at the whole, all the industries, so digitalization processes are super expensive. So the question would be, what do you think is preventing them from being successful? That's a huge number.
It is a huge number. So I've had in my career, so over the last decade, I've really focused on digital and data transformation. I've had some really super successful projects. So one that had an 800% return on investment. And then I've got two that weren't as successful as I would like. And they both have some common attributes. So the first attribute is the organization really wasn't ready for transformation. So what I mean by that is they didn't set up the right foundational components. So in both instances, the CEO went to a CEO forum, heard all this great speaking about digital transformation and didn't want to be left behind. So they came back and said, we need to do this. But they didn't really understand what that meant. And then in both instances, they hired me. And then I showed up. And as you've heard through this conversation, I've done a lot of this stuff. So I understand a lot of the nuances, the steps to get us through this. So the first thing is readiness of the organization. In both instances, both of those organizations were very low on the maturity scale in terms of their current use of technology. Both firms had actually underinvested in technology. So what that means is their existing technology was, in one instance, actually both, they were end of life, which means the technology is no longer supported by the vendor. So you have to re-implement the core technologies. So that's the first one. The next one is the organization felt that these were just technology projects. So, hey, we'll hire this guy. In that instance, it was me. We'll give him some money. He'll run off and he'll do all this magic and we'll be digitally transformed. That's not the case. This, as I kept on saying at one of the organizations, this is a team sport. I'm here. I'm not the quarterback or like the captain. The CEO has to be the captain. The CEO is driving the value. The other thing is the organizations also felt, back to the technology point, they weren't deriving new value. So it was just the technology project. And then there's sort of two other elements. The other one is the organizations weren't learning cultures. So they brought in me as an example or others, and they didn't understand this lingo. There was this culture of distrust. Don't understand this person. What are they talking about? And then the next thing is they were resistant to change. Like I look at both organizations. I had conversations with business leaders where they were talking about how they were ultimately afraid of, so if this is successful, my role as a business leader is going to change. And there was uncertainty. So what does that mean to me? So those are some of the things that I've seen. Like I said, I got 2 that didn't go as well as I would have liked. And those are the key things that I was able to sort of decipher of what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, because what you're describing is pretty much the life of every single consultant, I'd say, right? Because I have a pretty extensive background of sales and marketing consulting, and this is the same thing, all over again. So if you have a company that has never done an outbound sales, right, and they are about to learn outbound sales, it's very difficult for them, right? If they don't have the proper change management and they don't see the results really fast, they give up. And I think this is something that that you mentioned. And then if like the CEO or the head of sales, head of marketing is not supporting you, the people will not support you either. So what you describe is true for different kind of consultants. You are talking about the technology part, but anything else, I think it works the same way. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because if I was to implement technology, I would like to know this, because a lot of people don't know this. They think that you are the magic, that you have the magic pills. Now you give them the pill, they wake up the next day, technology implemented, ROI 800%, all good. But usually it doesn't work this way. So I'd like to inform the companies I work with that this is not going to be easy. And if somebody told you it was going to be easy, think twice about it, because that is most likely not true. Because if it's impossible for that to be easy. And the less you know about sales, marketing, or technology, the more difficult that change is for you, right? So I'm super happy that you brought this up, because it's universal. It works for every single consulting process, and I really, really appreciate that. The very last question. The very last question. It was good. It was great discussion. I think I have learned so much, and I'm thinking that the people watching and listening, they also have learned so much, because you have this ability to communicate very complicated topics in super simple and understandable way. And I think that's why you could be really good at explaining those executives, the buying committees, why they would need the technology. I know this is not an easy thing. Even if you're really good at it, they still might be a little confused, with all the elements that they do not understand. But my background is in is in sales, so I always ask this question about how do you approach, how do you sell technology? It's a very simple question, but it's extremely difficult to do, because it's basically selling the invisible, right? So if you can calculate ROI, that's beautiful. If you cannot, that's a little more difficult. But if you want to buy a car, you can go to BMW or Mercedes dealer, have a test drive, figure out which one you like better, easy. But how do you sell technology? If the people on the other side, they're not sure what they're buying exactly, they're not sure about the benefits. Very often they do not understand how the technology works. Maybe they understand, that there's a business problem that they're trying to solve through this technology. How do you approach, sales conversations when you're talking about technology?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is, I view all technology as an enabler. So it's not about necessarily selling the technology. It's about selling a vision of how the technology is going to enable something. So it enables a new value proposition, or it enables solving of a current problem. It's technology. I always joke about the silver bullet, right? It's going to solve, or the magic pill as you described it, it's going to solve everything. That's not technology. All technology has a certain area that it's really good and other areas where it's not. It's really around the discussion of the vision that the technology is going to align to. And this is one of the things I've noticed on LinkedIn is right now, because we're in this generative AI hype cycle, we're seeing so much about generative AI and all these things, but nobody yet, I haven't seen anybody who's doing a fabulous job of connecting the dots of how is it going to solve problems and how's it going to create that value that I spoke about. So to me, that's how I've always sold technology. It's not about selling the technology. It's about selling how it's going to help and what it's going to do for an organization. And that's one of the things I've seen. So I've worked with lots of really good salespeople, and I've worked with some who aren't so great. And the ones who really get it are the ones who focused on, this is how your organization is going to be better by having this technology. So that's how I've typically done it.
So it's not really about explaining the technology, right? It's about the business benefits more than technology, itself.
Exactly.
So there's no silver bullet, that you use to convince them.
No, unfortunately, I wish there was, because then I'd be retired sitting on the beach.
Yeah, I will keep looking for that one because I really want to know, because I strongly believe that this is one of the most difficult things to do, is to sell technology. And
it is, absolutely.
you can eliminate the word sell, because it's not about selling. It's about helping, solving a problem. But still, at some point, somebody needs to pay for it. But there is always an expected ROI based on that investment. So it's not really sales; it's investment in technology, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't have any, silver bullets in regards of technology sales, then I think we're done for today.
Yeah. Sorry.
It was great. It was good, and this is one of those conversations that I wish never end, because I feel that every single sentence is knowledge, So and just put it in a way that I believe that I understood, 98% of what you said, which is
Good.
which is a
Glad to
lot,
hear.
which is a lot. So thank you so much. You mentioned that you have some that one story that you will tell me whenever we meet in person and have a beer. Hope that happens.
Agreed. Agreed.
Hope that happens soon. So yeah, thank you very much. And again, this is one of those conversations that I wish never ended, because it's so good. It was so good. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective on why data is the future. And yeah, I think that's it. That was just unbelievable, knowledge that you shared with us, and I have to finish it because I do have more questions. I still want to keep going, but I think this is plenty. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Hope to meet you in Canada, in Europe, wherever you are, and then yeah, thank you very much. And then I will hopefully get to see you sometimes in the future. So
yeah,
thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. It was a good conversation.